So I picked up a MotoVox bike with a 250 dirt bike engine, but it's probably gonna need just a little bit of work. It has a lot of stuff done to it already, but it still has a long way to go. So they already mounted the engine to the frame. They welded up a plate there. And then in the front, they welded up these front mounts. Then you got a hydraulic disc brake on the back. But the only thing is, the wheel is not centered. So it's off to the left side. So I'm gonna have to remove this wheel and then remount the brake and then recenter the wheel. And then it came with a 28mm PWK, but the only thing is with the carb on this is it is super close to the seat. So there's gonna be no way to mount the carb here. So I'm gonna have to figure out an intake manifold. So hopefully I can come up with something to come down the side here, like on a normal mini bike, because there's gonna be no way I'm gonna be able to mount that carb there. I think it would totally interfere with the seat. And then the brake is on the left side, and that's where normally the clutch would go, because this engine is a manual, so it needs that clutch. So I'm gonna have to move the brake over to the right side and then put a clutch handle over here on the left. So another cool thing they did, they already have the shifter lever, which is nice. So that'll work out. That's one thing I don't have to do. And then I gotta figure out all the wiring. And then another thing is the exhaust. You got the exhaust coming out the front here. So I'm gonna have to come out here and then maybe down the side or maybe up to the center, I'm not sure. So that's one more thing I'll have to figure out. So it's definitely gonna be some work, but it'll be a fun project. I think I'm gonna pull this wheel off of here first and try to get this thing centered and then get this brake working. And I have a wheel with a street tire with a different rim, just a mini bike rim, a mag, and I might use on here for now until I get another tire for this wheel. All right, there we go. All right, so now we're in alignment. Got the chain nice and aligned and the wheels right down the middle. You got plenty of room for the brake. So I'll cut some spacers for this wheel, bolt that on there. So mount this brake handle over here on the right side. Throw this twist grip on here. And it'll definitely be a lot better with the brake on this side. Throw this brake caliper on here and hopefully it fits a lot better now. We'll see. And hopefully I got this thing spaced right so the wheel spins freely. Oh yeah. So now all I have to do is bleed that brake and I think we'll be good to go. So instead of bleeding the brakes by filling the master cylinder with brake fluid and then pumping the brakes, I was just going to use a syringe and push fluid through the caliper up through the hose and into the master cylinder. Be a lot easier that way. You're not sitting here pumping the brakes. Let me fill this thing up with brake fluid. All I have to do is slowly fill in the master cylinder and working all the air out. Makes it a lot easier. Looks like we have brakes. So that wheel spins nice and free. And we got brakes. So that'll work. So this carb on here, there is just no way that I'm gonna be able to mount this carb on this intake. I mean, it just sticks up too far. So I was trying to think of a way I could run an intake down kind of like a regular mini bike where it comes out over here somewhere. So I have two of these pit bike intakes. They normally fit on a pit bike like this. So the carb mounts in the front there. So I was thinking I could use one on here to run the carb down. Something like that. And then another one, something like that. Then the carb will come out in pretty much the same location as it would with like a Predator 212. So I'll bolt that up on there and we'll see how that works out. And it looks like it's a good fit. I mean, they fit perfect on here. I'll bolt this one to the top one, and I run a gasket between there, so it should seal up. So if you have any doubt that this thing won't get a carb signal because the intake's so long, check out the 3-foot intake video. I mean, that bike actually ran good with a 3-foot long intake. So I don't think this one will have a problem getting a good signal through the carb with this long intake. And then the carb adapter I made out of a VM22 intake. So I think that'll work. Put on the sleeve here for the PWK. So we got the carb on there and all the vent lines hooked up. See if we can get full throttle here. Yep. It seems like it turned out pretty good. And I think everything's sealed up nice. And it pretty much comes out in the same spot as it would with the Predator. Or pretty close, and throw an air filter on it. So now I'll try to figure out a clutch cable and the exhaust. So I picked up a universal exhaust kit for this bike on Amazon. And instead of running the exhaust on this side with the carb, I'm gonna flip it over and run it on the other side. So I already cut and added a section to this pipe. So to keep the pipe nice and tucked, I think I'll weld these two pieces here so the pipe runs through the frame and then back out, and then I'll run the pipe out here. And that way, there's no chance of getting your leg burnt. All right, so now I will tack up those other pieces on there and then pull the pipe off and weld it the rest of the way. So I got it all welded on there. So now I will figure a way to mount the pipe right here. So I think I'll cut this piece and then add it, or add a little length of it to here. So actually the pipe will come out straight. So now I'll add this piece here and then the muffler there. So I made up this sleeve for the muffler so I could just slip it on here, and then I'll weld up a tab onto the frame there to hold the pipe onto the sleeve, because otherwise if it's welded together you can't get the pipe off the bike unless you take off the motor or take off the engine. So I figured a sleeve would be a lot better, so I'll go ahead and weld up a tab on there. I got my bracket welded on here. So now all I have to do is slide the pipe on, bolt it right there. So I think that'll work. Feels like it's pretty tight down there. So while I'm over here, I might as well do this chain tensioner. It's actually a dirt bike wheel. So I think I'll just weld it up on there. Maybe back a little farther, and that way I have a slide. So that worked out pretty good. And it's got plenty of adjustment. And then I also added another bracket up here for this side of the exhaust, the front side, that bolts to the flange that was already on the pipe. So then you have the front part and then the rear mount. That way it keeps that slider together. So now I gotta figure out where to mount this battery box. And I thought about mounting it up here because it's kind of small. I think it'll fit up in here. Let's see here. Yeah, see, that'd be a good spot. So I think I'll mount it right there. Oh yeah, that'll work. So that don't look too bad on there. At least it's small. So I pretty much got everything done except for this clutch cable and wiring it up. And then a gas tank, and I have a little tank that goes up here. So we're getting pretty close. So I gotta figure out a gas tank on this thing. So I figured I'll use this small tank off a motorized bike. I mean, it fits on there decently, but the only thing is trying to figure out a mount for it. So I figure I'll run these metal or aluminum pieces across there and then bend them down and then bolt them to the tank and then bolt them to the side here on the bike. And then the outlet comes out in an okay spot. It'll go underneath here and come out to the carb. So I think I'll do that. So I'll bend these at an angle. So I got these bent. So now I'll bolt the tank to these and then bolt these to the side here, and that'll hold the tank on. So that turned out pretty good. Actually turned out a lot better than I thought. So now I'll move on to the wiring harness, and this could get interesting. Hopefully it's just plug and play, and we'll see. So every time I hook up a starter switch on this thing, or a starter button, for some reason the relay stops working. So I'm just gonna go ahead and bypass the relay and run a 60 amp starter button up to the front. And that way I don't have to worry about the relay going out. So we got the starter button hooked up and the ignition switch wired, and then I got the kill switch up here. So hopefully it all works. Then I installed a 32 Pilot. I had a 38 in here and tried to start it, and it would not run with a 38. I mean, it almost start, but it would just blow black smoke. So it's totally too rich for it. So it has a 32 Pilot and a 115 main. So we'll see if that fires it up, hopefully, with a 28mm PWK. And then I made up a ground bracket for all the ground wires. So I think the wiring's pretty much set up. So on this side, you have wiring running right next to the chain, and it's supposed to have a cover for this to protect that wire, but I don't, so I think I'm just gonna make this cover fit. I mean, it's close enough. I drilled a hole here to bolt it there, and then I think I'll put a bracket right here, and then just bolt it to the motor or engine right here.
A few minutes later.
That cover turned out pretty good, so I made up a little bracket here to bolt it there and bolt it there. Even though it's not the one for this engine, it actually turned out pretty good. I'll throw the seat on here and we'll see if it'll fire up. So let me go ignition and it should fire up. Oh yeah, that was quick. Like a 32 Pilot's about right. So far, anyway. See if this kill switch works. Alright, that's a good sign. So the kill switch works, the ignition switch works, and it seems like it runs pretty good with a 32 Pilot and a 115 main, but we'll find out on the street. So let me throw the seat back on here, and we'll take it out and see what it does. Yeah, I was already at the top of first right there. All right, this thing's gonna need some gear, I can tell you that right now. It's gonna need some gear and some jetting. All right, let's see what we got. Uh-oh. The gear shift fell off. The maiden ride and the gear shift fell off. All right, let's see if I can get going in whatever gear I'm in. Oh yeah.
A few minutes later.
Alright, there we go. Got a shifter. I mean, I don't know why it needs one. All the other bikes don't have one. Man, this thing needs some gear bad. I mean, we're already topped out. I can use fourth gear as first. I mean, it feels like it'll move out really well if it had the right gear. Like, here's first is like climbing a wall. There's fourth already. But it feels like it'll have a pretty good top speed. It has plenty of torque. Yeah, it's pretty much maxed out right there. Like, first gear is pretty much useless. You could climb a wall with it. So the bike has plenty of power, it's just way over geared. I think with the right gearing, it feels like it'll probably do like around 60 or so. But with the gearing on it right now, this thing will climb a wall. I mean, you can pretty much start out in fourth gear. And another weird part about it is it has reverse, so that's kind of a trip.